So good afternoon, HAR members. Welcome and thank you for joining us for today's virtual event. We are going to have Jeff with us today. Jeff Jones is going to be discussing buying and selling businesses. Jeff is president of Advanced Business Brokers. Since 1976, he's been involved in appraising and selling small to mid-sized businesses, including manufacturing, distribution, retail, and service companies. He and his staff have sold over 1,000 businesses in Texas and the Southwest United States. So, Jeff, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really looking forward to what you have to share.
Well, thank you, Christina. I'm looking forward to working. Really appreciate HAR working with our state association, Texas Association of Business Brokers, and putting on this webinar as well as the upcoming courses that we'll be putting on through your HAR organization.
Yes, thank you. And you will be talking to us about those courses towards the end.
Yes.
I will ask, Jeff does have a presentation for us, so we will let him get through that presentation and handle questions and answers towards the end. If you are typing something into the chat that you only want Jeff and I to see, make sure it says that you're typing it to all panelists. If you are typing something in you want everyone to be able to see, change that audience to all panelists and attendees so that everybody can see it and respond. So Jeff's going to start going through his presentation here with us. Now, Jeff did share his presentation with us, so we are recording this and we will provide you the slides after this is over. So go ahead and the floor is yours, Jeff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Well, yes, we'll be talking about buying and selling businesses, but I think what I'd like to do is sort of make the distinction between business brokerage and real estate. While there's a lot of similarities, there are significant differences. Owning your own business is part of the American dream. Own your own house, own your own business is part of the American dream. However, what percentage of the adult population do you think has or owns their own business? If you drive down Westheimer, you'd think everybody in town owns their own business, but in fact, only about 2% of the adult population actually owns their own business, where there's at least one full-time employee. We call everybody else closet entrepreneurs or dreamers who are dreaming to own their own business. That's 98% of the population. There's 4 ways to start or to get into your own business. One would be to start your own business, and approximately 60,000 people every year in the Houston metro area, that's how they get into business. They start from scratch. Having some technical difficulties here, but we'll get it resolved. You could inherit a family business, would be another way, but I don't think many of us have opportunity for that to happen, but it does for some. Buying a franchise is another way to get into your own business. The franchise industry claims a 90% success rate for people who buy a franchise. Well, numbers don't lie, but sometimes people tend to exaggerate. While getting into buying a new franchise is one way to get into business, the reason that franchises have a reasonably high degree of success as opposed to startups, where startup businesses fail about 50% the first year, and within 5 years, 85 to 90% of those startups are no longer in business. So a very high risk scenario in trying to start your own business. But if you buy a franchise, they only take you if they know how much money it takes to launch that franchise and to buy it to begin with. So a franchisor is going to limit those people to get into their own business when they don't have sufficient funds to do so. The other issue is that if you buy a franchise, particularly a successful one, or a successful concept, then presumably if you have the money and you buy into a successful concept, that you're going to have a high degree of success. The other way to get into business would be to buy an existing business. And there we find that we have about a 75% success rate for people who buy an existing business, and 3 to 5 years later, they're still in business. So still certainly buying an existing business is much more risk-free than starting from scratch. Although going into business for yourself is always a high-risk venture. They say 60,000 startup businesses every year. There's only about 120,000 businesses in the whole Houston area that are considered full-time businesses. So if all those businesses succeed, we double the number of businesses within 2 years, but were it not for the fact that so many fail or go out of business. Nationally, there are approximately 9 million businesses with at least one full-time employee. In the Houston metro area, there's 120,000 businesses with at least one full-time employee. So that's really our marketplace. And as you can see in business brokerage, it's a very houses in it. So this is our market primarily. Well, we do handle businesses outside of the immediate area. 95% of our businesses are going to be in the Houston metro area for our company, and so that 120,000 is the market from which we're dealing with. There is approximately a 2% annual growth rate in businesses, about 850,000 or so new startup businesses every year, and then given the ones that fail, result in a 2% net growth. Buyers of existing businesses, our experience has been that there's a 75% success rate. The benefits of buying an existing business would be you're buying a proven concept that's already profitable, as opposed to starting from scratch and hoping that you're going to reach profitability. And most of the time, it takes somewhere between 2 and 3 years for a startup business even to break even. Buying an existing business, you get existing trained employees, and today that's one of the most difficult aspects of owning a business. The biggest complaint I get from business owners is that they have trouble finding skilled employees. So buying that existing business, you have them already. You get existing customers and clients, established policies and procedures. You have an existing facility with all the licenses and permits in place, and training by the seller after the sale is a major aspect. That's one significant difference between buying or selling real estate versus a business. Is most of the time in selling, particularly in residential, you never have the seller and buyer never even meet each other. But in buying a business, that seller staying on to assist in that transition after the sale is a critical factor. So during the whole process of showing a business, having the meetings between buyer and seller, and then the training afterwards is highly important to a transaction. Then the availability of financing. Starting from scratch is very difficult to get financing for a small business, but there are basically 2 sources of financing for buying an existing business. One would be through the SBA loan program, and the other would be through seller financing. Other than that, there's very few resources available to obtain financing and buying a business. If you're just buying equipment, you're buying vehicles, you can go to most any bank, and they will provide financing. But if you're going to buy a business, that bank wants you to use the SBA loan program because the bank gets a 75% guarantee from the government, and many of these banks sell off these SBA loans in the secondary market, and they couldn't sell them off if there wasn't that 75% guarantee by the federal government. Why would somebody sell a business? That's always a concern that buyers have. Unfortunately, there's a negative concept that when you hear that a business is for sale, you think the immediate reaction is there's something wrong. And when somebody tells you that they want to sell their house, you don't immediately think, well, there must be something wrong with that house. The slab is cracked, the roof is leaking, No, you might ask them why they're selling, but there's no negative connotation to sell various types of real estate. But when it comes time to selling a business, confidentiality becomes critically important, because there is that connotation that there must be something wrong with the business or it wouldn't be for sale. Well, there's a lot of reasons that a small business is become for sale. One is they're just tired of government regulations and constant changes in the taxation issues. Tired of employee training and turnover, particularly in the retail arena and the food service arena, where there is a high turnover of employees. It can be very time consuming, hiring, training, and then having those people turn over and you have to go out and hire more people can be very frustrating in owning a business. Sometimes the entrepreneurs, or the grass is always greener on the other side, and so you frequently find other types of businesses that might be of interest to you. And so finding another investment is one of the reasons people will sell the businesses they've got, so that they can then get into whatever other kind of business that might be of interest to them. Health problems is always the problem. Sometimes you see to the business, but health problems are a frequent reason that a legitimate business could be for sale. Divorce, unfortunately, causes businesses to be for sale. When you own your own business, it takes a lot of hours and time, and that can lead to family. A high percentage of reasons that when we get a business for sale is one of the reasons that it is for sale. Partnership problems, like divorce, is another problem. You start out with a partner, everything's fine, but sooner or later, it usually ends up where one party thinks the other one's doing all the work and the other party is getting all the benefits. And so partnership problems come about, or you reach some point where one of you wants out. And so actually another part of our business is appraising businesses, and we do a lot of appraisals where the primary issue is partnership issues. Then burnout, you can just get tired of working long hours in a small business. And so burnout is one major reason that businesses are for sale. The other is retirement. And most people tend to think that's the best scenario for finding a business where the owner's ready to retire. Frankly, it's been my experience that many times the business has been retiring for several years before the owner decides to retire. And then the business is on the downside of that bell curve, and oftentimes more difficult to bring back. So retirement, while it is a frequent reason the business is for sale, the timing of that retirement can be important. Well, who are the buyers for a small business? Well, one could be family members of that same business. Another would be employees of the business. Individuals that include corporate executives, blue collar workers, and foreigners who have moved to the U.S. That's a significant number, or significance of the people who buy businesses from us. Private equity groups, these are investment groups that buy businesses as opposed to real estate. And so we deal with a lot of private equity groups, particularly when we start talking about mid-sized businesses, generally something over $1 million, million to $20 million range value-wise. Then a big segment of our buyers are going to be these private equity groups. Competitors can oftentimes be a good buyer for a small business. It's one way to grow. There's two ways to grow a business. That is, one way is internal growth. The other is through acquisition. And unfortunately, many small business owners don't fully realize that opportunity, but companies that grow quickly oftentimes do that by way of buying out competitors as opposed to trying to do all internal growth. And public companies are a small segment of our buyers for small businesses. Public companies typically buy other big companies rather than small businesses, but every now and then we'll get a business that's a good fit for a public company. And so that they become a good buyer prospect. Well, where do we find businesses for sale? Well, one is through personal contacts with friends. Basically, we use our referral network, and I probably spend more money in marketing and time dealing with my referral network as opposed to trying to find sellers directly who want to sell. And so we do keep in touch with accounts who have clients that want to sell. We can and we do personally call, or if we get a particular type of business or get buyers who are looking for particular types of businesses, we'll send letters if they're thinking about selling their business. Another way to find businesses is what we call FSBOs, like you have in real estate. Sometimes business owners will advertise their own business for sale on Craigslist or newspaper ads or trade publications. And so we'll comb those places as well to find those companies or individuals who are considering selling their business. The real supermarket of businesses for sale from a buyer standpoint is business brokers. They have listings on businesses for sale where we have a motivated seller. Typically, the value is been at least in the realm of reasonableness because the broker understands the value, how to value these businesses, and hopefully takes listings that they make economic. Definition of a business broker. A business broker is an intermediary dedicated to serving clients or acquire businesses. Typically, a business broker finds sellers and buyers, provides information and business advice. Oops. Go back here. Maintains communication between negotiations of the party and facilitates a closing process. Similarities between real estate and business brokerage. In Texas, most business brokers are licensed by the Texas Real Estate Commission, and so therefore we have to follow the rules and regulations of TREC. We have a fiduciary duty to our clients, similar to what you have in real estate. Obligation to be fair to the buyer prospects and provide all known information to buyer prospects to make an informed decision. Most of the time we're representing sellers. As you know, in Texas, it's against the law to represent both buyer and seller. So we generally represent the seller, although 5 to 7% of our transactions, I'm representing the buyer. But in that, sharing a fee with another agency. Brokerage fees are typically paid as a percent of the selling price, which would be similar to selling residential or commercial real estate. And generally, we only work on exclusive listings. I have no interest in competing with the seller and trying to sell their business. They can sell at any price that they want. I've got a listing agreement that specifies what I have to try to get for the business. And so I don't want to compete with the seller, and therefore we only work on exclusive listings. What are the differences between real estate and business brokerage? And they are significant. First place, our listings are typically at least 1 year. In fact, my listings are actually 2 years, as opposed to 6 months or less in residential anyway. So our listing agreements are a little longer, but that's because it takes longer to sell a business typically than it does in real estate. Brokerage fees typically run 10 to 15% of the selling price, so our fees are significantly higher than real estate fees. And it typically takes 4 to 12 months to sell a small to mid-sized company. and sometimes even longer than that. So a lot of factors come into play: where the business is, what kind of business it is, what the price and terms of the deal are. But in any case, somewhere when seller always wants to know, how long is it going to take you to sell my business? And the general answer here is somewhere between 4 and 12 months. Must be able to, in selling businesses, you have to be able to understand and analyze tax returns and financial statements. Must understand business valuation methods to properly advise the client regarding the business value in terms of sale for their particular business. And there are several valuation methods to value a business. Generally, the cap rates, the multiples, while the terminology is the same as in commercial real estate, the range of those cap rates and multiples are significantly different than, say, commercial real estate, selling shopping centers, office buildings, and things of that nature, where the cap rate may be in the anywhere from 6 to 9%. Our cap rates are typically more like 25 to 35%. Confidentiality is probably the most critical difference, in particular between residential real estate and selling a business. And when you sell a house, there's no issue of confidentiality. You put a big for sale sign in front of it, you advertise it on the internet, you tell the world that the place is for sale, again, because there is no issues of people thinking that something's wrong with the property. But because that indication that there's something wrong with the business when it's for sale, that's a negative aspect that requires confidentiality. Typically, a seller doesn't want his employees to know the business is for sale, because then they get concerned about losing their job. They don't want their suppliers to know, so that they don't quit supplying them. They don't want their landlord to know, so the landlord starts looking around for another tenant. Just a lot of negative issues take place when someone decides to sell their business, and confidentiality is breached. So in dealing with buyers, every buyer has to sign a confidentiality agreement prior to getting any significant information about any business that is for sale. In business brokerage, there's very little or almost no co-brokering, even among business brokers, let alone with real estate agents. And again, most of that has to do with the fact of the need for confidentiality. And so there's never a broker on the other side of our transaction. On the other hand, we do pay referral fees to licensed real estate brokers and agents. So if you stumble across somebody who you find that wants to either buy a business or sell a business, we typically pay a 10% referral fee for that information, but then we'll deal directly with that buyer or seller in handling the transaction rather than co-oping with another agent or broker. Financing sources are totally different for buying a business versus real estate. Basically, we do have a few all cash sales, but probably 45, maybe as much as 50% of our transactions are actually seller financing. And a lot of that is because oftentimes the seller's financial records really aren't good enough for a buyer to get an SBA loan. And so then the only source of financing is the seller themselves, which provides some confidence level to the buyer that the seller is willing to finance. The other source of financing is through that SBA loan program that I mentioned earlier. And we'll talk about the terms of those notes here in a few minutes. Unlike real estate, or in most cases, when we do represent a buyer, I say that's somewhere between 5 and 7% of our transactions where I actually represent the buyer rather than the seller, then the buyer is actually paying our fee. Again, we don't look to co-op with another brokerage company. If my buyer is looking to buy a business or a property from another company, then my client is going to be paying my fee, and the other broker will get their fee from their client. In business brokerage, closings are typically handled by escrow attorneys rather than title companies. Most title companies don't have a clue how to handle the paperwork, which is totally different for a business than for real estate. And so there are escrow companies out there that specialize in handling closings for businesses, and those are the companies we typically use when we're handling the sale. Again, business brokers typically represent either the buyer or seller, but not both, even though we actually work. I probably, when a deal gets done and I'm representing the seller and selling their business, I spend more hours with the buyer than it takes a fair amount of time to even get the business on the market. But then I find a buyer, I have to qualify that buyer. About 85% of the time, I'm helping the buyer get financing. I've got to deal with a landlord to get the lease assigned. If it's a franchise business, I got to deal with a franchisor. So we'll end up spending far more hours with a given buyer by the time we get a deal done than I did with the seller. Although technically I represent, my client is the seller. Marketing is done by way of direct contact with buyer prospects within the industry and/or utilizing business for sale sites where you have to disclose who the business is, what the address is, pictures of the business like they do on LoopNet. And so all the sites that we advertise on, anywhere from 5 to, there's about 12 different business for sale websites that we utilize. That's where we'll do our marketing. In qualifying a buyer for a business, 35 to 40% of the buyer prospects come to a business broker not even knowing what they want. They just come in, they know they want to leave their job, they want to get into something new, they've got some money, but they need to get into some sort of business where they don't have to go back to college to learn how to do it. And so it is a high percentage of people who come to see us on a first-time basis who don't come in on a particular business, but rather just come in to tell us what their basic criteria, how much money they have to make out of a business, general types of, sometimes it's easier to determine what they don't want and then zero in on some things that might make interest to them. Prior to disclosing any specific information about businesses that are for sale, the business broker will want to know the following information about buyer prospects. They'll want to know the contact information, name, address, phone number, their work experience, the level, education level, availability of equity funds, type of businesses wanted. And then once we have that information, we're in a much better position to educate our sellers or our buyers and help them find businesses for sale. So prior to receiving any detailed information about specific businesses, the business broker will require a buyer prospect to approve 2 documents, one of which anyway is similar to real estate. That is your information about brokerage services. So we get buyers to sign this statement. The other is the confidentiality agreement. This document requires the buyer prospect keep all non-public information confidential. They'll sign these 2 documents. The typical non-compete agreement has provisions that agree where the buyer agrees not to tell others that the business is for sale, except for their professional advisors. It's an agreement not to utilize confidential information to the buyer agrees not to talk to employees, customers, suppliers, and landlords until authorized by the seller. Again, it says all the issues have to do with confidentiality. Financing options for buying a business. Again, say the 2 basic ways are through the SBA loan program or through seller financing. If it is an SBA, if the business and buyer qualify for an SBA loan, the buyer requirements such that the buyer must have reasonably good credit. Down payments range anywhere from 10% to 20%. And the lenders really want the buyer to have direct business experience in the business that they're buying, although frequently that's not the case. And so then we have to use the issue of management experience. So if you don't have the buyer doesn't have direct industry experience, at the very least, he needs to have business management experience to make a lender comfortable. Typically, SBA loans for a business only are 10-year terms. If the real estate's involved, then we can wrap the business and the real estate into the same 7A loan program. And those loans can be anywhere from 15 to 20 years, depending upon how large a component the real estate is compared to the business. From a buyer requirement or from a business requirement to qualify for that SBA loan, the business must be able to provide 2 to 3 years of tax returns reflecting sufficient earnings to give the buyer a reasonable salary and repay the bank loan. Typically, all assets of the business will be the security that the lender will have. Seller financing, typically down payment is 35 to seller notes. Typically for a business, it will range 5-year terms. Interest rates on seller notes today range somewhere between 6 and 7%. By the way, interest rates on the SBA loans, now they're making some changes right now, but for the last year or two, is prime plus 2 3/4, which puts it around 7.5% is what our SBA loans have been. Right now, they've got some special programs going on where they're going to have a 6-month delay in payments. Interest rates are going to be a little lower. So buying a business right now, we can probably get some of the best terms possible through the SBA. But if we have seller financing, seller notes are typically requires a personal guarantee, just like a bank would require, and seller to retain first lien on all assets of the business. Referral fees, business brokers, again, will typically pay a referral fee to licensed real estate agents and brokers. Typically, it's 10% of the total brokerage fee is what the referral fee is. All we're really looking for is a name and contact, and then we handle the whole transaction from that point on. At this point, Christina, do we have Sylvia? Is she online with us?
She's not. She might be attending the session.
Okay, she was supposed to pick up at this point.
Okay.
To talk about TAB. Do we give her a minute to log on, or what do we do here?
No, I don't think she'll be logging on as a panelist.
Okay. Well,
so we do have a couple questions. Do you want to go through the rest of this, or do you want to answer the questions?
Yeah, let me quickly go through the rest of this, and then we'll save the remaining time for the end.
Perfect.
Texas Association of Business Brokers is our association at the state level. It is not affiliated with any other organization, although there is an International Business Brokers Association that most of us belong to, but the two organizations are not tied directly. TAB was formed in 1978. Actually, I'm one of the founding members of TAB. We have chapters in Houston, Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio. Each of these chapters meet once a month, typically for a luncheon meeting. TAB's current membership, we're a very small industry. So we're a narrow, business brokerage is a narrow niche of commercial real estate. We've got approximately 180 members throughout the state of Texas. To become a member of TAB, for those of you who might be interested in getting into business brokerage on a full-time basis, company membership is $350 a year, associate membership is $200, and affiliate members, which would be title companies, insurance companies, accounting practices, and so forth, can join for $250. Monthly chapter meetings, chapter educational programs. We have a state conference, although this year it got canceled because of the virus. Benefits of being a member of TAB, we get standard forms. Our listing agreements, our standard forms are considerably different from real estate. And so our associate, we have a forms committee that our members, which includes listing agreements, buyer confidentiality and warranty agreements, standard cooperative brokerage agreements, and hold harmless agreements, and seller disclosure of property conditions. The activities will include our chapter monthly meetings, educational programs that we put on for our members, and our annual state conference. We have developed some professional educational courses, and recently we've worked with HAR, who are now going to work with us in presenting these courses. And so we feel the TAB courses are considered the best in the industry. Each course is taught by qualified instructors. Courses are 1 or 2 day classes. They cover topics such as legal aspects of business brokerage, tax issues, business valuation, analyzing and recasting financial statements, ethics and standards, advertising and marketing, and we have a 2-day boot camp. In conjunction with HAR, we are presenting these courses online now. And on June 1, I'll be doing a course called Analyzing and Recasting Financials for Small to Mid-Sized Businesses. This course is actually approved by TREC for credit as well, so those people who need continuing education could take this course. It's an 8-hour course. You get 8-hour credit. It focuses for small to mid-sized businesses. On July 9th, we're going to have a course called Legal Aspects of Business Brokerage. This is actually a 4-hour course, but you learn in this course an understanding of the legal aspects and the viewpoints of attorneys and the court to be better positioned to mitigate broker liability and addressing potential issues and having better conversations with buyers and seller attorneys. In business brokers, we work a lot with attorneys representing both buyers and sellers. So this is an excellent course in learning some of the legal aspects of buying and selling businesses. Then on August 6th, we're going to have Pricing Small Businesses and the Valuation Process. This course is an 8-hour course. It's an overview of business valuation process for small and mid-sized businesses with a focus on professional techniques used to price a business for sale. So anybody who's going to get into business brokerage, they need to know the various valuation methods and be proficient in helping their clients determine the value of their business. On September 3rd, we have a course called Principles and Ethics of Business Brokerage. This is an 8-hour course. The course includes regulatory bodies that control or regulate activities of business brokerage, canons of professional ethics and conduct, the 20 articles of the TAB Code of Ethics, trade association that provide guidance, rules, and regulations for business brokers, and the 10 commandments for safe brokerage. On October 8th, we have a course called Tax Issues of General Business Brokerage. It's our TAB course 1020. It's an 8-hour course. Every financial decision in selling a business has tax implications. This course looks at the difference in stock sales versus asset sales and the tax implications associated with each. Also covered are tangible and intangible assets, including depreciation and amortization, Some components of a business transaction receive ordinary tax treatment. Some receive capital gain treatment. So these are all issues that we have to be aware of as a business broker. This is an excellent course to explain all that. On November 5th and 6th, this is our 2-day boot camp, which is an all-encompassing course on business brokerage. So anybody first getting into the business of business brokerage would I'd highly recommend that you take this particular course. It's an initial training to become a business broker taught by seasoned leaders in the profession. We have a professional designation. TAB issues a professional designation called the Board Certified Broker, or BCB. Requirements to get that BCB or to completion of these designated courses, pass a comprehensive exam, and agree to TAB's professional standards and ethics, and have industry experience for at least 3 years. We welcome each of you to attend our Houston chapter luncheon meetings for those of you who are in the Houston area. We meet on the 3rd Thursday of each month, generally at the Palm Restaurant, although unfortunately due to the virus, we are now meeting online. So this month, we would encourage you to join the TAB webinar, which is Thursday, May 28th, starting at 11:30. And if I get the next slide up here, it should give me, there's the webinar Zoom ID number to get into that webinar. And there's a little promo for it. Our feature speaker is going to be a couple of accountants who are going to be talking about the impact of the virus on the loan program. So with that, I think we have completed, Christina, so we'll try to answer any questions that might have come up.
We did have a couple questions. Actually, 2 different people were asking what is the commission for buying and selling business?
Yeah, I had that on one of the slides. It ranges anywhere from 10 to 15%, depending on the size of the business. It can be a little lower than that for multi-million-dollar businesses, but anything under $1 million, in general, the fee is 12%. But somewhere between 12 and 15 there's no standard fee. It's negotiated with each transaction.
Okay. Lois asked a question: what are the various business valuation methods used to determine the business value in terms of sale?
Good question, and it can be a complicated process, but generally the first step we make at determining what we call an indication of value is to see what the tangible assets are worth. And so we'll look to see what the value of the inventory is, what the value of the equipment, vehicles. And so most businesses, if they're in operation, are going to be worth at least what the tangible assets are. For a business to be worth more than that, then we use an income approach. And most often on small businesses, there's 2 factors that we need to have to value a business. One is the earnings of the business, and the other is a multiple or cap rate applicable to that level of earnings to convert the earnings into a value. Often in design, we're using what we call discretionary earnings to an owner operator. For most of these small businesses, that's a standard level of earnings that we use. So basically that's a pre-tax number, adding back personal benefits that the owner has run through the business, including his own salary. And so that results in what we call discretionary earnings. And then to that, we're going to apply a multiple. And that multiple can range anywhere from 1 to 3 times the earnings, depending upon the risk scenario of the particular business. Just a very quick rule of thumb aspect of what a business is worth: roughly 2 times whatever its discretionary earnings are. But 95% of the businesses sell somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5 times discretionary earnings, plus other equipment. The only thing it would be plus is any working capital, cash, receivables, or if they own the real estate, that would be additional value.
Okay. We had a question here from Kelly. They said, you stated when your brokerage represents the seller, you end up spending more time with the buyer. In this situation, when you are representing the seller, Is it in the best interest of the buyer to hire a brokerage firm to represent them so that there is no conflict of interest?
I don't mind working with another broker if the buyer wants to hire one, but that buyer is going to have to pay the broker fee. They're not going to co-op with us. There's frankly very little that another broker can do on the other side. I've got everything that buyer needs. I've got the financials of the business. I've got all the history, the background of the business. I'm helping the buyer get financing. So there's very little another broker could do to even justify their fee. But again, unlike real estate, where there's almost always a broker representing each side, that's not the case in business brokerage. And one of the big issues is the confidentiality reason for one thing, and the other is that somebody representing the buyer is not going to know even what to ask for, will not have access to a lot of the information that's needed, and so the listing broker is the one that has all that information, and so it's just very difficult to work with another agent unless they're truly representing the buyer, as we do. As we do, uh, when I do represent a buyer, the buyer is actually paying my fee. And if I'm dealing with a business where another broker is involved, I'll deal with that broker who's representing the seller. But I don't expect to share fees with that person. My client's going to pay my fee.
Okay. Alex asked, when the business has certain permits or licenses involved with that type of business, do you help buyers transfer or apply for these permits or licenses?
We don't help them do that, but I guess a typical example would be a liquor license. If you're buying a restaurant or a bar that has a liquor license, there are agencies in town that do that, and we would recommend who get actively involved in it, other than letting them know where they can go to get that liquor license transferred.
Okay. We cut out there a little bit, but you were basically saying you don't actually apply for them. You just kind of guide them where to go.
Yes, yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you. There was a question here. What is the definition of discretionary earnings?
Good question. And highly critical when earnings mean different things. There's pre-tax earnings, there's after-tax earnings, there's adjusted earnings, EBITDA earnings. But there is a definition. Both our trade associations and our appraisal associations have defined discretionary earnings. It's basically gross income less all of the operating expenses, but prior to a single owner's salary. Earn as pre-tax profits, add back the owner's salary, add back depreciation, interest expense, and any personal perks that the owner has somehow run through the business. That gives us what we call discretionary earnings. And that's where we apply that multiple of 1.5 to 2.5 times to come up with an indication of that.
Okay. Question here about TAB. Can we join TAB for training and staying informed, or do we have to be active in the business of brokering businesses?
No, you can join TAB and just attend our luncheons and become more educated about the process. There's no requirement as to how quickly you move through the process. But if you want to meet bankers and attorneys and accountants and business brokers who will attend these meetings, we would welcome you to do so.
Okay. There was one more question. Oh, sorry. Where do we find the forms for listing representation, agreements, etc.?
There, you got to be a member of TAB, and we get those on the website. But you got to go into the member side of that website to have access to those forms.
Okay. So you did already answer a question about commission, but I see a couple more, and they basically ask the same thing. Does the buyer pay the broker fee instead of the seller?
Now, when we're representing the seller, only the seller pays our fee. If I'm representing the buyer, only the buyer pays our fee. We don't collect a fee from both sides.
Okay, very good. And several people asking, can we play this back? Are we going to be sharing the presentation? Yes, we record all of these, and if our presenter gives us their slides, which Jeff did today, we will share those slides with you as well. So you will get the recording and the slides after we're done here. Let's see. Yes, so somebody said, please send the recording too. We will. All right. That looks like most of the questions I have. Oh, clarification here. The business is worth 2 times the annual earnings minus the value of equipment, question mark?
No, the multiple of earnings includes all of the assets of the business, inventory, equipment, vehicles. So the value of any business in general, the value of any business is either the value of the tangible assets or some multiple of the earnings, whichever is greater. So if there's between inventory and equipment, if there's $100,000 in value there at replacement value, but the business based on earnings is worth 300,000, then the goodwill for that particular business would be 200,000. But that price had to be based on a multiple of the earnings for the value to be greater than the assets.
Okay. Antonio asked, do you sell real estate and businesses together?
Yes, about 35% of our transactions include the actual sale of real estate. And so there we act like a real estate broker in that respect, or a commercial real estate broker, and we are handling the commercial value of it. Typically, we highly encourage our sellers who own the real estate to get an appraisal, because I'm not actively day-to-day involved in knowing what the value of the real estate is. I actually have I do business appraisals, and I've got a commercial real estate broker or a real estate agent, a licensed commercial appraiser, real estate appraiser on staff. So when the occasion arises where we need to know what the value of the real estate is, I rely upon him to do an appraisal and tell me what the value of that real estate is. Then I can determine what the value of the business is, add the two together to come up with a total value.
Okay. And that was actually Antonio's follow-up question was, do you do appraisals? Okay. William asks, is there an anticipated period of time a buyer looks to recapture their upfront investment or down payment?
Typically within 5 years. You got to be able to recoup the value you pay for the business within 5 years.
Okay.
Through leverage, you can do it much quicker than that in terms of recouping your down payment. But in terms of total value of the business, most people expect to make the earnings have to be sufficient that they can replace that value within 5 years by way of.
You kind of cut out there at the end. Sorry, Jeff, we heard 5 years and then it cut out.
Yeah. I mean, say 5 years is sort of the time frame that people should be able on if you look at it from the standpoint of the total value, you want to be able to recoup that total value within 5 years. You can shorten that time frame in terms of if you're through leverage. If you only have to put 25% down, you should be able to recoup that back in the first year.
Okay. Some clarification here from Jessica. We might have had a cutout or something, but she was just looking for you to repeat your answer for the question regarding the worth of the business.
I'm sorry, repeat that again.
So it was a question that was asked earlier, determining the worth of the business. I think the original question was the business is worth 2 times the annual earnings minus the value of equipment, and you gave us some clarification there. Jessica was asking if you could repeat that.
Well, it's not minus the equipment. It's an either or. The value of any business is either the value of that equipment or some multiple of the earnings, whichever is greater. Mm-hmm. So if the value is based on earnings, then all of the assets of that business are included in the price.
All right, very good. That looks like all the questions we have for you, Jeff. So thank you so much for taking the time to do this for us.
Okay, thank you. I enjoyed it, and look forward to hearing from everybody. If it has any questions, we'll try to after the fact, we'll try to answer them as best we can.
Great, and don't forget to sign up for our upcoming virtual events. Tomorrow we have virtual communication using video. We actually have Jennifer Wahab, who is on our executive committee. She is a realtor and a team leader, so she's going to be talking from a practical standpoint. And we have Claudia Hernandez, who's HR's Director of Video Services, who's going to be talking from a production standpoint. So you can go sign up for that session if you haven't yet, har.com/webinars. and go ahead and take a look at the other upcoming ones we have in May. We have some good things on our schedule. So thank you again for attending today. A lot of our members are saying, thank you, Jeff. They found this really informative. So thank you again.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Have a good day, everybody. Bye-bye.